The night it happened, Houston was trembling. Rain hit the windows like 1,000 desperate knocks, and the wind howled through the chimney like an old voice trying to be heard. I was sitting alone in my kitchen, a cup of chamomile tea cooling between my hands. I remember the faint hum of the refrigerator, the ticking of the old wall clock, everything ordinary, everything calm. Then the phone rang. It wasn't the usual tone from Ethan. His calls always started with a cheerful, "Hey, Mom," and ended with me reminding him to eat something green for once. But this one sounded like panic wrapped in static. "Mom. Mom, please," the voice gasped. It was him. Ethan. My son. I would have known that voice anywhere. "Don't call the cops. They have Liam. Please, send the money now. They'll kill him if you don't." The line cracked, the storm roared outside, and my whole body went cold. "Ethan? Ethan, baby, what's happening?" I shouted, but the call cut off with a sharp click, like a knife through silence. My tea spilled. My heart raced. I could hear nothing except the pulse in my ears. I don't even remember how I found my purse. I just remember trembling fingers typing numbers into the bank app, sending everything I had to the account the man on the other end had texted. My breath came in short, shaky bursts. When it was done, I sank into the chair and waited. The storm outside kept raging, but inside, all I could hear was that voice echoing, "They have Liam." I called Ethan back immediately. The screen lit up, his contact photo smiling back at me, a picture taken last Thanksgiving with Liam on his shoulders. But when I pressed call, it rang once, twice, then went straight to voicemail. I tried again. Still nothing. My hands shook so badly I dropped the phone. I whispered a prayer, maybe half a dozen, and then the logical part of me, the mother who had seen her share of bad luck, took control. I called 911. The operator's voice was calm, professional, but distant. They told me it sounded like a phone scam, that dozens of similar calls had been reported recently. "Ma'am," the woman said softly, "criminals can clone voices now. You shouldn't send money." Clone voices? I almost laughed. The absurdity of it. That was my son. I'd heard that exact tremble in his voice when he was 12 and broke his arm falling off the roof. No one could fake that. Still, a seed of doubt lodged itself in me. If it was real, every second mattered. If it wasn't, I had just thrown away my entire savings to a ghost. By dawn, the rain had stopped, but the sky was bruised and heavy, as if the storm had left its grief behind. I didn't wait for permission or common sense. I grabbed my car keys and drove straight to Ethan's house. The neighborhood was still asleep, water pooling along the curbs, tree branches scattered like broken bones. When I reached his driveway, the first thing I noticed was the silence. No music, no television, not even the barking of the neighbor's dog that always greeted me. The second thing I noticed was the door. It wasn't locked. It was slightly open, the way a breath hangs on the edge of a sentence. "Ethan," I called, stepping in. My voice sounded small in that house. Too small. No answer. The air inside was damp, mixed with the faint smell of coffee and rain-soaked carpet. A mug lay shattered near the counter, dark coffee dried into the tile grout like an old bruise. The sofa was pushed askew, one cushion on the floor, a remote crushed beneath it. My mind wanted to explain it. Maybe Liam had been playing, maybe Ethan had knocked something over, but my gut said otherwise. I moved slowly, every creak of the floorboards sounding like a warning. The hallway was darker than I remembered. The framed family photos, Ethan's graduation, Liam's first birthday, looked ghostly in the half-light. I whispered their names again. Ethan? Liam? But the only answer was the faint hum of the refrigerator and my own breath trembling in the air. Upstairs, I pushed open Liam's bedroom door. The smell of crayons and dust greeted me, oddly comforting, like a piece of the past refusing to move on. His little sneakers were lined neatly by the wall, the blue ones with lightning bolts he loved. The bed was made, but the blanket had slipped to the floor, as if someone had sat there in a hurry. Then I saw it. A piece of paper, bright yellow, lying under the desk lamp. A crayon drawing. 2 stick figures holding hands under a crooked sun. Above them, in uneven letters, it read, "Daddy and me, safe forever." My throat closed. I touched the paper gently, afraid to tear it. The crayon wax felt rough beneath my fingers. That's when I heard it. Something faint, a digital beep from the corner of the room. For a second, I thought it was a toy, but then I realized it came from the baby monitor mounted near the ceiling. Its light blinked, red. I climbed onto a chair and turned the switch. The small screen flickered alive, showing static, then an image, frozen. The last thing it had recorded. Ethan's face, blurred but unmistakable, standing near the door, speaking to someone outside the frame. Then a distortion, a glitch, and darkness. The timestamp read, 2 weeks ago. I felt my knees weaken. 2 weeks. That was exactly when I last spoke to Ethan. He'd said he was busy with work, but would visit soon. How could I have missed the signs? I stumbled back into the hallway and fumbled for my phone. This time, when I called the police, my voice cracked with something beyond fear. It was guilt. Within minutes, red and blue lights flashed outside. Detective Rivera, young but with eyes that looked too tired for his age, stepped into the house. He took everything in with quiet precision. The mess, the mug, the open door, the baby monitor. "Ma'am," he said gently, "when was the last time you heard from your son?" 2 weeks, I whispered. Then last night. He called me, or someone did. He asked me to replay the recording from my phone. I held it out, my hands trembling, the same way I had held Ethan's hand when he was small and scared of thunder. Rivera listened, his brows furrowing. Then he asked if he could plug it into his laptop. Lines of colored waves appeared on the screen, beautiful, terrifying patterns of sound. After a moment, he looked at me with something that wasn't disbelief, but unease. "Mrs. Hayes," he said, his voice measured, "I've seen a few of these cases lately. This waveform, it doesn't match a natural human signature. There's repetition in the harmonics. It's artificially generated." I blinked, not understanding. "You mean, that wasn't my son?" He hesitated. It sounded like him. But it wasn't real. Someone used synthetic voice software to imitate him. I felt the world tilt. The walls, the photos, the faint smell of Ethan's cologne still hanging in the air, it all blurred. For a long moment, I couldn't breathe. Then I said, almost to myself, "So the person who begged for my help never existed." Rivera's eyes softened. "We'll trace the number. Whoever did this, we'll find them." Hours passed in a haze of questions and forms and quiet tears. When the officers left, I sat alone in the living room, surrounded by silence too thick to breathe in. The rain had started again, light this time, tapping against the window like a heartbeat. I picked up Liam's drawing from the table. The words, "safe forever," stared back at me. I wanted to believe them. I wanted to believe my family was still somewhere in that promise. But as the thunder rolled again, I whispered to no one. If that wasn't my son on the phone, whose voice broke my heart tonight? Morning came, but it didn't bring peace. Sunlight spilled through the kitchen blinds like pale threads, catching the dust in the air. Everything in my house looked exactly the same. The lace curtains, the framed family photo, the stack of unpaid bills. Yet nothing felt familiar anymore. The night before, my world had cracked open. And all that was left was an echo. I sat at the table where Ethan used to eat breakfast every time he visited. I could still see him there in my mind, hair messy, spoon in one hand, phone in the other, teasing me about how I still brewed coffee like the 1980s. He'd lean back, smile that crooked grin of his, and say, "Mom, when I make it big, you're getting a kitchen that cleans itself." I'd roll my eyes and remind him that nothing in this world truly cleans itself. You've got to care enough to wipe away what's left behind. Now, that line haunted me. I hadn't cleaned up the mug I dropped the night before. It still sat on the counter, a stain spreading across the wood like a bruise that wouldn't fade. Detective Rivera had promised to call me first thing in the morning. He didn't. I told myself he was busy. But deep down, a thought kept creeping in. What if they had found something and didn't know how to tell me? I walked to the window. The neighborhood looked calm again. A mail truck passed. Kids rode bikes through puddles. Ordinary life continuing, as if the world hadn't just stolen the sound of my son's voice. When the phone finally rang, I jumped so hard my tea spilled again. But it wasn't the detective. It was Ethan's number. My breath caught. I hesitated, then answered. Ethan. Mom. That voice. Warm. Familiar. Softened by the static. Mom, please. You shouldn't have called the police. They're watching me. Don't. The line cracked and went dead. I screamed into the empty room. Ethan. Ethan. My voice bounced off the walls and came back to me smaller, weaker. The call log showed the same number. Same duration. Rivera's words replayed in my head. It's artificially generated. But I couldn't believe that. Not when I could hear the tremor in his breath, the slight rasp from years of late-night coffee and long hours at work. Machines didn't know how to ache like that. I sat down and let my hands rest on the table. They felt like someone else's hands, older, heavier. I closed my eyes, and for a moment, I was back in another storm, 15 years ago, the night Ethan lost his father. He had been 12, standing in the doorway in his pajama pants, trying not to cry. He said, Mom, will you be okay? And I, holding a heart too heavy for truth, had lied. Of course, baby. We'll be fine. We had built our whole lives from that lie. Two people pretending to be unbreakable. By noon, Rivera called. Mrs. Hayes, I reviewed the trace. The number that called you is registered to your son, yes, but the signal came from a different device. He paused. One that hasn't been active in the state for 2 weeks. My stomach turned. What do you mean? He exhaled. It means your son's phone was used remotely. Someone cloned it. And if the GPS logs are right, Ethan's been out of Houston for a while. I sat down hard. Where? Outside Dallas. That's all we know for now. The floor felt like it moved under me. Dallas, that was 3 hours away. 3 hours, and yet it felt like another planet. I stared at Liam's crayon drawing on my counter, the one with the crooked sun. If Ethan had left, why hadn't he told me? Why hadn't he taken Liam with him? That night, I couldn't sleep. The house hummed like it was breathing. Every creak sounded like a whisper. Every gust of wind felt like footsteps. At 2 in the morning, I found myself standing in the hallway outside Ethan's old room. The door hadn't been opened in years. I turned the knob and stepped inside. The air smelled faintly of cedar and dust. His childhood trophies still lined the shelf, spelling bees, science fairs, a baseball medal he never cared about. But what caught my eye was the photograph on the wall. Ethan holding Liam as a baby, both of them smiling at the camera. In that smile, I saw everything I'd lost. The certainty that love alone could keep you safe. I touched the glass. It was cold. And in that cold reflection, I saw my own face, lined, tired, but still searching. I whispered, "Where are you, my boy?" By morning, Rivera showed up again. He looked like he hadn't slept either. His tie was loose, his eyes shadowed. "Mrs. Hayes," he said, "we pulled traffic cam footage near your son's apartment from 2 weeks ago." He placed his laptop on the table. There, in grainy black and white, was Ethan, leaving the parking garage, carrying a small suitcase. Beside him, a woman. Tall, dark hair, sunglasses even though it was evening. My mouth went dry. Who is that? We're not sure yet. We ran facial recognition. No ID match so far. He paused the video. The woman turned slightly, just enough for me to catch her profile. Something about her posture, confident, careful, told me she wasn't just a stranger. Do you think he left willingly? I asked. Rivera hesitated. I think he knew her. I felt something sink inside me. Knew her. That simple phrase burned like betrayal. Was my son running from something, or someone? And if so, why leave without a word to his mother? After the detective left, I sat on the porch for hours, watching the rain clouds roll in again. There's a certain kind of silence that only mothers understand, the silence between worry and truth. It's the space where all your fears live, and none of your prayers are enough. A neighbor, Mrs. Cole, stopped by to drop off a casserole. She asked if I was doing all right. I smiled, the kind of smile women give when they don't want to explain pain. She didn't press further. God bless her for that. When she left, I ate one bite, maybe two, and then stared at the fork for a long time. The metal reflected my face, twisted, older than I remembered. I realized that I wasn't just scared of losing Ethan. I was scared of learning who he really was. At sunset, the phone buzzed again. A text message this time, from an unknown number. He's safe. Don't ask questions. My heart jumped. I typed back immediately. Who are you? Where is Ethan? No reply. Then a second message came through. If you want to hear his voice again, check your email. My hands trembled as I opened the inbox. There it was, an audio file titled, Message from Ethan. I clicked play. Hey Mom, the voice began, calm, almost cheerful. Don't worry. I just need some time. Don't believe what anyone says. It was his tone, but too perfect. Every syllable even, every breath at the right moment. No hesitation, no warmth between the words. And that's when I knew. Whoever sent this didn't know my son at all. Because Ethan never called me Mom. He always said Mama. A machine had tried to imitate love, and failed. That night, I didn't cry. I sat in my armchair, the one near the window, and listened to the rain whisper against the glass. For the first time in days, I didn't feel fear, just a cold, steady anger. Someone had used the voice I loved most to steal from me, to frighten me, to make me doubt my own heart. But they had made one mistake. They underestimated a mother who still remembers the sound of her child's first cry. As lightning flashed outside, I whispered to the empty room. You can steal his voice, but not his truth. And with that, I decided I would find out who had done this, even if it meant tearing open the very world that had learned to lie in perfect imitation. The next few days blurred together like raindrops sliding down a window, separate but indistinguishable, each carrying its own reflection of fear. Detective Rivera came by almost every morning, always with the same quiet urgency, like a man chasing shadows that slipped through his fingers. We set up a small workspace in my dining room. My son's picture looked down from the wall, smiling in a way that made me both proud and sick with worry. Rivera had filled the table with printed emails, screenshots, and call logs. Strings of numbers, patterns, maps, all of it meaningless to me, except that somewhere inside those pixels was my son. You see this, he said one morning, pointing at a chart of colored lines. That's the routing pattern from the fake call. Whoever did this used voice cloning software connected through a VPN. Not your average scammer. So you're saying, it's organized? I asked. He nodded. Highly. They've done it before. Targeting people through emotional manipulation. The technology makes it too easy now. He hesitated, then added, they usually pick victims whose relatives have been recently offline. Like your son. I clenched my hands together under the table. Offline? What does that mean? It means Ethan hasn't used his bank cards, phone, or work credentials for nearly 3 weeks. 3 weeks. Each syllable dropped like a stone into the pit of my stomach. That evening, after Rivera left, I decided to search Ethan's house again, not as a mother in denial, but as a woman desperate for truth. The air smelled the same, coffee, dust, and something faintly metallic, like forgotten fear. I opened his desk drawers, tax papers, business cards, a photo of him with a woman at a tech conference. Her smile was sharp, almost rehearsed. Her name tag read Amber Lewis. I remembered Ethan mentioning her once, a software developer, brilliant but secretive. I took the photo to Rivera the next morning. His eyes sharpened. We've been trying to identify the woman in the CCTV footage. This could be her. He left immediately to track her down, and I spent the rest of the day waiting. Waiting has a taste, you know. Bitter at first, then stale, like chewing on time that refuses to move. At sunset, my phone finally rang. Mrs. Hayes, we found her. Amber lived in a small apartment on the edge of downtown. Rivera took me with him, though I wasn't sure why. Maybe because he knew I wouldn't stay home anyway. When she opened the door, she looked nothing like the woman in the photo. Her hair was shorter, her eyes hollowed, her hands shaking as she clutched a half-empty mug of coffee. Amber Lewis? Rivera asked. She nodded, wary. I'm Detective Rivera. This is Mrs. Hayes, Ethan's mother. Her face changed, not guilt, not fear, but grief. Oh God, she whispered. You're his mom. Where is he? I blurted out. Amber motioned for us to come in. The apartment was cluttered, stacks of hard drives, tangled cables, empty ramen cups. It smelled of cold pizza and sleepless nights. She sat down on the edge of a chair. Ethan, he tried to do the right thing, she said, voice trembling. But they wouldn't let him. Who wouldn't? Rivera asked. The people he worked for. Amber explained how Ethan's company had been developing AI-assisted communication software, technology meant to mimic human voices for customer service. But a few months ago, Ethan discovered that a secret team within the company was selling cloned voices to a dark market network. People who used them for fraud, extortion, even fake ransom calls. He told me he was going to report it, she said, wringing her hands. He said it was wrong. But the next day, he got a message from someone inside, a threat. He went to meet them, and he never came back. My breath caught. So the voice that called me. Amber nodded. It was them. They used his own voice to cover their tracks. For a moment, the room spun. I had spent weeks praying to the sound of my son's voice, not knowing it was the weapon that had been turned against him. Rivera leaned forward. Do you have proof? Amber nodded toward a pile of drives. Everything's in there. Emails, audio samples, transaction logs. But they're encrypted. Only Ethan had the password. Back at my house, Rivera sent the drives to the digital forensics team. I stood by the window, staring at the gray sky. The clouds looked like heavy curtains drawn too tight. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about what Amber had said. He tried to do the right thing. It sounded just like Ethan. Too honest for his own good. Too much like his father. I walked into Ethan's old room again. The faint smell of cedar still clung to the wood. On the dresser sat a small box, one of those password-protected USB safes he used to design. He had given me one years ago, joking that it was for grandma-level secrets. I plugged it into my laptop. The screen asked for a code. I tried Liam, Houston, safe forever. Nothing. Then I remembered something he used to say whenever I nagged him about being careful online. Mom, the best passwords are the ones you never forget, but no one would ever guess. I typed Mama always. The device clicked open. Inside were folders, encrypted, yes, but one image was visible. A screenshot of a message thread. The last message sent from Ethan read, "If anything happens to me, tell Mom to look for the sound, not the words." The sound, not the words. I didn't know what it meant then, but those words burned into me like a riddle I couldn't shake. I sent the message to Rivera immediately. He replied, "We'll decode it. This might be the key." The following afternoon, Rivera called again, his voice sharp, urgent. We cracked one of the drives. It links Ethan's boss, Daniel Ward, to offshore accounts connected to identity fraud networks. Mrs. Hayes, your son might have exposed something very big. Then we need to find him, I said. We're trying, he said, but every trace of him goes dark after the night of the storm. The storm. The one that had knocked out power in the city. The same night the fake call came. It wasn't coincidence. Later that evening, Amber showed up at my door. She looked exhausted, like someone who hadn't slept in years. I shouldn't be here, she said, but I found something. She handed me a flash drive. Ethan gave this to me a week before he disappeared. He said if anything went wrong, I should give it to you. My fingers shook as I plugged it in. It contained one audio file, simply named truth.wave. I pressed play. Ethan's voice filled the room. Mom, if you're hearing this, I must have failed. I didn't mean to disappear. But please know, I tried to protect people. They're using my voice for something terrible. Don't trust anyone who calls you. Find Amber. She'll help. And Mom, tell Liam I love him. The words ended there. The silence afterward felt heavier than sound itself. Amber covered her face. He recorded that the night before he left. He said he was going to meet Ward. He thought he could negotiate, maybe even get proof. Proof of what? I asked. Of the stolen voices, she whispered. Of how many families they've tricked. Rivera arrived minutes later. When he heard the recording, he looked grim. This changes everything, he said. We're not just looking for a missing person anymore. We're chasing a crime syndicate. I felt a strange calm settle over me. Maybe it was shock, maybe resolve. But for the first time since this nightmare began, I felt something I hadn't felt in weeks, purpose. If the world had stolen my son's voice, then I would use mine to bring him home. That night, I sat alone again, replaying Ethan's message. The rain had returned, gentle this time, tapping softly against the window like someone asking to be let in. I thought about the line, look for the sound, not the words. I closed my eyes, listening. There, beneath the hum of the storm, I could hear something, faint, rhythmic, like a Morse code pattern hidden in the recording. It wasn't just a message. It was coordinates. My son had left me a trail, hidden inside the sound of his own voice. And I would follow it. I played Ethan's message again. Not for the words. For the pulse beneath them. Tap, tap. A pause. Tap. 2 taps close together. Then a longer hum, like a breath held too long. I closed my eyes and counted like mothers count heartbeats. When Ethan was small, he used to tap our dining table while he did math problems. He said numbers were music with manners. He kept time with his pencil, not with noise, but with order. Once you knew the rhythm, you could follow it anywhere. Look for the sound, he'd written. So I did. I called Detective Rivera. Bring headphones, I told him. The heavy kind. The sort that cancel the world. He arrived with coffee and the kind of patience only tired men carry. We sat in my living room with the rain holding its breath outside. Rivera looped the audio, separated the voice from the bed of noise beneath it, then split that bed into bands like a stack of glass panes. On one pane, the taps lived. Clean. Insistent. What do you hear? He asked. Coordinates, I said, and surprised myself by how sure I sounded. He stared at me as if I had just told him the wind could write. Then he started to measure the gaps. Short gaps, long gaps, grouped by 3, always returning to the same interval. Ethan's favorite trick from high school, when he hid algebra answers inside drum beats. We translated the rhythm into numbers. The numbers into latitude and longitude. The screen painted 2 digits that meant nothing to my old eyes until Rivera laid a map over them. The pin fell by the rail yards, south of town. An abandoned cold storage park no one had cared about since the canning company left. Concrete in every direction. Warehouses with metal teeth for doors. A water tower that leaned a little, like a tired preacher. Don't go alone, Rivera said. I wasn't planning to, I said. But I am going. He didn't argue. He only called it in. We reached the edge of the rail yards at dusk. The sky wore that heavy purple that comes when the day holds on too long. The fences buzzed with old electricity. We parked 2 blocks out and walked the rest, our breath visible in the cold. It smelled like old metal and wet cardboard. Far off, a horn moaned. Even the wind sounded bored. Rivera's people fanned out in pairs. No sirens. No shouting. Just the quiet of a hunt conducted by those who know noise makes cowards brave. My shoes found every crack in the pavement. It wasn't the best terrain for an old woman, but worry can turn clay into stone. I kept up. "This is it," Rivera whispered when we reached a warehouse with a busted letter stenciled above the door, be turned into something between a pea and a bruise. Fresh tire grooves cut the dust by the ramp. A new lock hung on an old latch. He looked at me. "If we go in, you stay behind me." "Of course," I said. I had no interest in being brave in the wrong way. They popped the lock. Metal scraped metal. The door rolled like a thundercloud. Cold air rushed out, the kind that lives in machines and remembers when it held meat. Inside, darkness, then the sick glow of emergency lights. The room was big enough for 10 trucks, but only empty pallets sat in the middle like a bonfire you forgot to light. A forklift slept in the corner. No sound except the tick of cooling metal and a soft mechanical exhale from somewhere deeper. "Clear," one officer whispered after a sweep. "Nothing." "That's wrong," I said before I could stop myself. "Ethan doesn't write riddles that end with dead air." Rivera tipped his head. He listened, not to me, but to the room. "Hear that?" he asked. I held my breath. There it was, a tone you don't notice until you do. Thin. Even. Like a cricket that learned discipline. It seemed to come from the floor. "Sublevel," Rivera said. He found a hatch behind stacked pallets. The lock on it was cheap. The choice you make when you think no one will look low. The hatch groaned open. Cold breath air rose. The tone grew louder. Down a set of metal steps, the kind that ring like bells under boots, waited a corridor. Gray walls. A strip of light that didn't blink. At the end, a door stood with a keypad. Rivera's tech lifted a small screen to the pad and smiled. "Old firmware," he said. "Flimsy." The door clicked. And the sound hit us. Not a tone this time. 1,000 small voices at once. Not words. Just syllables, breaths, half-cries. Machines breathing them. Fans turning heat into wind. Racks of servers made a forest of black glass. Cables ran like vines. On a table, a row of headsets sat like a choir at rest. The hair on my arms lifted. "God forgive them," I whispered. "They've put people in jars." "Evidence everywhere," Rivera said. "Recorders on. No one touch anything hot." His people moved like surgeons. A small light blinked in the far corner. Not server light. Too pretty, too human. I followed it. A box, no, a little device the size of my palm, sat hidden under a coil. The light pulsed in a rhythm my bones knew before my head did. Tap, tap. A pause. Tap. "Ethan," I said before I could temper my hope. "You left breadcrumbs." "Ma'am?" one officer asked. "Beacon," I said. "He makes things that hide inside other things." We traced the signal through another door and down a short hallway where the cold sharpened into a knife. The room at the end was storage in name only. A cot. A bucket. A chair bolted to the floor. The smell of bleach fought a losing battle with fear. On the cot lay a man thinner than my memory. Hair overgrown. Beard gone wild. But when he turned his face, the light caught his eyes, and everything that ever mattered returned at once. "Ethan," I said. My voice broke, but I kept it low. The body learns how to whisper near danger. He tried to sit up. His hands were bound with tape that had lost its pride. "Mama," he croaked. "Mama," he said, and I knew. Machines can steal your vowels. They can't steal your habits. Rivera moved fast, hands steady. We're getting you out, he said, already pulling at the tape. Any traps? Ethan's eyes cut to the ceiling. Thermals, he whispered. A sensor tied to the rack power. If you cut the wrong line, it wipes everything. Which line? Rivera asked. The one that looks right, Ethan said, trying to smile. They count on that. I almost laughed. My boy, still making jokes in the mouth of a wolf. Don't move, Rivera told him. He radioed a tech, who came in with the care of a man carrying nitroglycerin. They talked in short words older men never taught me. Then the tech nodded, followed a cable that disappeared under a plate, and flicked a kill at a box near the door. The fans sighed. The room held its breath. The servers kept their song. My knees finally remembered they were knees. I sat on the edge of the cot and touched Ethan's face. Warm. Real. He closed his eyes like a child who made it to shore. I'm sorry, he whispered. We'll argue later, I said and kissed his hair. Today you breathe. He smiled with half a mouth. I left you a map, he said. I found it, I said. With my ears. Of course you did, he said. Something thudded in the hallway. Not a machine. A foot. Rivera wrapped a hand around my arm and pulled me to the wall. His other hand went to his sidearm. Two officers took the door like a frame. A shadow slid across the floor like spilled ink. Then a man stepped in. No mask. No rush. A careful man. A man who practiced walking. 50, maybe. Sharp coat. Sharper eyes. I had seen those eyes in a photograph I found in Ethan's desk, smiling next to him at a ribbon cutting, back when boys still think mentors are saints. Mr. Ward, Rivera said. Come. Like greeting a neighbor in the cereal aisle. Daniel Ward looked over the room and inhaled like a man appraising meat. Detective, he said. You really should have called ahead. We keep unusual office hours. He saw me then. His smile made my skin feel cold. Mrs. Hayes, he said. I've heard your voice. Strong. You've stolen enough voices, I said. My own surprised me. It carried a blade I didn't remember giving it. He tutayed like a priest. Borrowed. To build products families want. Insurance. Concierge medicine. Donor campaigns. People respond to voices they trust. And to fear, I said. Fear is simply trust with a deadline, he said, as if explaining weather. Behind him, another figure appeared. For a second, the room emptied of air. Amber. She wore black. Her hair was tied back. She stood half a step behind Ward and a half shade to the right, the shadow position of a lieutenant. She didn't look at me. A crack ran through my chest like glass under heat. You, I breathed. She didn't answer. She didn't even blink. Ms. Lewis, Ward said, please escort our guests to the exit, before they trip over a cable and destroy months of work. Don't, Ethan whispered to me. Mom, Amber. I wanted to shout, to accuse, to drag truth into the light by its throat. But Rivera touched his ear. His eyes flicked to Amber's collar, where a tiny black dot clung like a bored fly. He whispered, wire. And the floor of my anger cracked open to reveal relief. Amber stepped forward. Her face stayed calm, but her fingers made a shape only anxious people make. Thumb to ring finger, then thumb to pinky. The secret sign of a woman trying to count her breaths. Mr. Ward, she said. There's a problem with the east racks. Thermal readings are high. Handle it, he said without looking. She walked right past us, close enough to touch, and kept going to the main room. Rivera followed with two officers. The rest held Ward where he stood, in that doorway like a painting hung too low. Do you know what your son did? Ward asked me, as if we were seated across a clean table. He tried to burn down a new economy. He thinks people want truth. They don't. They want what soothes them with the least friction. My son thinks people deserve to hear the ones they love without paying a tax to thieves, I said. He's old-fashioned that way. Ward smiled. So are you. A thud shook the hallway. Not violence. A switch. Then the server room changed its song. The tone dropped like a sigh of a patient anesthetized. Rivera's voice came over his radio. Amber disabled the purge rig. We have a clean capture. Go. Mr. Ward, Rivera said as he reappeared in the doorway, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit wire fraud, extortion, kidnapping, and a catalogue of crimes long enough to make a priest yawn. Ward didn't flinch. You think you have everything, he said, but sound is wind. You can trap a breeze in a bottle and call it proof. Tomorrow it's gone. Rivera lifted a hard drive in a static bag. This one doesn't evaporate. Ward's mouth tightened. He moved fast then, faster than men like him usually do. His hand went under his jacket, a flash of steel. Everything contracted to a point. I did the only thing my body remembered from years of drills at church and school and life. I moved forward. Not at him. To Ethan. I covered my boy with my body and pulled him toward the floor. The officers moved like a single person. A shout. The heavy sound of a gun losing the argument to training. The weapon skittered. Ward hit the wall. The hallway returned to seconds arranged in order. Amber stood at the end of the corridor. Her face had finally broken. Not with fear, with relief so deep it made her look young. Are you hurt? She asked me, voice raw. I'm old, I said. Everything hurts. It's how I know I'm here. She laughed once, then wiped at her face, angry at the wet. He told me you'd say something like that, she whispered. Who? I asked, though I already knew. Your son, she said. They cuffed Ward. They read him a string of careful words that made no difference to a man who thought language was a tool instead of a bridge. He watched me while Rivera spoke, like a man building a list of things he will never forgive. Mrs. Hayes, Rivera said, turning to me when the echo of the cuffs died. Do you want to? Yes, I said. I want to go home. Hospital first, he said. Then home, I said. Where the voices are mine. Outside, the night had deepened into real dark. The water tower leaned against a moon that finally had the decency to show up. The rail yard lights hummed with old duty. They wrapped Ethan in a blanket that had the good smell of detergent and official kindness. He didn't let go of my hand. Not even when they loaded him into the ambulance. I climbed in after him, my knees complaining about stairs that were never built for softness. Amber stood near the loading bay. She held her arms tight, as if hugging herself for lack of better options. Come, I told her. Your family tonight. She shook her head. I have to give a statement. And she looked down. I betrayed him before I helped him. He asked me to stall Ward. I hesitated. It cost him time. You brought him back time, I said. That's more than most of us ever do. She smiled then, not with pride, but with the relief of a body allowed to stop running. The ambulance doors shut. Inside was a clean bright made for blood and the absence of it. The paramedic checked Ethan's vitals. He said things that meant yes in a language built by caution. Ethan turned his head. Mama, he said, barely a breath. Yes, I whispered. I thought I'd lost you, he said. You never will, I said. You can lose phones. You can lose passwords. You can even lose your way. You don't lose me. He closed his eyes. A tear found its way through his beard to his ear. I wiped it with a corner of the blanket and kept my hand there because sometimes touch is the only honest sentence. While the ambulance rolled, I took the folded paper from my coat pocket, Liam's drawing. I had carried it like a relic through all of this. I unfolded it and smoothed the creases with my palm. Daddy and me, safe forever, it said in a child's brave handwriting. I held the paper where Ethan could see it when he woke. Forever isn't a promise, I whispered to the drawing. It's a job. The siren stayed silent. The road found our tires in a way that felt like forgiveness. I watched the city slide past, the closed diners, the open gas stations, the one church that never seemed to sleep. Lights on at all hours for anyone who needed to be seen. We passed the water treatment plant. It smelled like metal and learning to live with what life sends back to you. I let the smell fill me. You take in what's true. You let go of what isn't. That's how bodies keep going. That's how families do too. At the hospital, they took Ethan through double doors. They wouldn't let me follow, not yet. Policies guard the living with the stoicism of saints. I sat in a chair that pretended to be soft and watched a TV on mute report a story about a storm moving east. The captions didn't match the mouths. For once, I didn't mind. Rivera sat beside me. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. Some silences deserve company more than phrases. After a while, he said, "We imaged the drives. We have enough to put Ward and his ghosts away for a long time. The Bureau will take the rest. There are other labs. Other racks. We'll keep looking. Sound travels," I said. "Yes," he said. "So does truth." He stood, as if remembering he was a man made of schedules. Then he turned back. "You pulled your son to the floor when Ward went for the gun." "He's bigger than me," I said. "Gravity did most of the work." "I've seen men freeze at that distance," he said. "You didn't." "I'm a mother," I said. "Freezing is for ponds." He smiled and left me to my thoughts. I looked at the clock and thought about soup. About the way the spoon sounded against the pot when Ethan was small and learning that dinner means you live another day. I thought about Liam's voice on Sundays, his laugh caught in Wi-Fi, still true in its own digital way. We can teach machines to fake us. We can't teach them why it matters. I folded the drawing again, careful with the edges. I tucked it back into my coat, close to the heart that had learned a new kind of beat tonight. On the far wall, a poster told people how to breathe during panic. In through the nose. Hold. Out through the mouth. Count to 4. I did as it asked. The air went in and out. The numbers made a rhythm. My body remembered how to be a house where hope could sleep. The doors swung open. A nurse called my name. "Mrs. Hayes?" "He's asking for you." I stood. My legs held. My hands knew where to go. I followed the nurse down a hall that smelled like antiseptic and mercy. The lights hummed a note that felt almost like music. Not beautiful. True. At the threshold, I stopped and watched my son breathe. "Part of him will need time," the nurse said softly behind me. "But time is a thing we have." I nodded. I knew the work ahead. Doctors, statements, the slow unspooling of a story people would want to make simple. It wouldn't be simple. It shouldn't be. I stepped to his bedside and took his hand. He squeezed, weak but sure. His eyes opened. They found me, as they always had. "Home," he whispered. "Yes," I said. "Soon." He closed his eyes and slept. I sat, and for the first time in weeks, allowed the quiet to be kind. Hospitals keep time in their own language. The clocks on the wall tick, but they don't measure hours. They count small victories, breaths taken, fevers broken, doors that swing open for good news. I learned that language sitting by Ethan's bed while Dawn stitched a thin seam of light across the blinds. Machines murmured. Sneakers whispered along the hallway. A coffee cart rattled by like a cheerful ghost. The room smelled like lemon cleaner and cotton. Clean, simple, undecorated truth. Ethan slept. His chest rose like a tide that had finally remembered where to go. I kept my hand on his forearm so he wouldn't have to wake alone. When he did, his voice was sand and velvet. "Mama." Nothing on earth sounds like that. Not a recording. Not an imitation. Just the old name making a bridge between the then and the now. "I'm here," I said. "You're safe." We let silence sit with us like an old friend who knows when to speak and when not to. Then I told him what mattered. Ward was in custody. The servers were seized. The recordings had been copied to more places than cowards could burn. He closed his eyes with relief that seemed to loosen something in his face. I thought I'd disappeared for nothing, he whispered. Nothing would be if you hadn't left me a song, I said, and he smiled because he knew I meant the taps, the map he hid where love would find it. A nurse came and set a tray on the rolling table. Oatmeal, toast, a little square of butter like a promise. She winked at me and said, "Get some of that in him, Mama." Hospitals understand the word even if they put other titles on charts. I stirred the oatmeal till the butter made a small lake, then blew across the spoon and fed my grown son as if we had all the time in the world to learn the art of beginning again. By afternoon, the storm had rolled itself into the next county. The windows wore a brand new blue. Rivera stopped by, tie-tied this time, hair combed like a man who'd slept and remembered what mirrors were for. "We've got statements, chain of custody, and a digital trail a mile wide," he said at the door. "The Bureau is coordinating with other states. It wasn't only here. Trouble rarely is," I said. He stepped in and lowered his voice. "Amber's cooperating fully. She had a wire on, just as you guessed. She only looked like she'd chosen a side. I felt the knot behind my ribs loosen. She carried guilt like a coat 3 sizes too big. I wondered. She was scared," he said. "But she tipped us when it counted." "Then don't make her a villain to make the papers look clean," I said. He nodded. "We'll let the truth work at its own speed." Before he left, he set a small evidence bag on the counter. "Inside, my phone. For when you're ready," he said. Ready for what? For the sound that was not my son but wore his shape? For the ache that came every time I even thought of pressing play? "Not yet," I said and pushed the bag back toward him. "Keep it till tomorrow." He respected that like a sacrament, tucked the bag away, and left with a grateful little bow men give when words would spoil a decent moment. Ethan dozed. I read the pamphlets therapists bring, a gentle map through the forest of after. Trauma needs light and routine. It wants a name, then it wants patience. Some days you will be your old self. Some days you will be made of smoke. Both are normal. Keep breathing. Keep simple promises. I liked their honesty. It made me think of cooking, the way soup forgives mistakes if you keep stirring and don't walk away. Late in the day, a knock. Amber stood in the doorway, hesitant, hands folded like a student waiting to be called on. She wore no makeup. It made her eyes honest. "May I?" she asked. "Come in," I said. "Sit." She sat, then stood, then sat again. The dance people do when their courage is bigger than their balance. "I owe you and Ethan the truth," she said. "Before all this, I told myself I was just writing code. I never asked about the hands it fell into. When Ethan found out, he begged me to help. I waited. I was afraid of losing my job. Afraid of losing the future I'd built on a shaky floor." Her throat bobbed. "He walked into the lion's mouth because I didn't open the back door sooner." "The lion had more than one mouth," I said. "You closed the one you could. That counts." Her eyes filled in a way that made me want to hand her a napkin and a second chance. "He said you'd say something like that," she whispered. "You two keep putting words in my mouth," I said, and let a small smile find me. We talked logistics then, testimony, protections, the slow legal clock already winding itself up in a courthouse somewhere. She looked lighter when she left, as if the act of telling the truth had relieved her body of carrying it. At the threshold, she turned. "I grew up without a mother," she said. "Today, for 10 minutes, I didn't." I nodded. "Come back when 10 minutes isn't enough." She did something brave then. She let kindness land. She nodded once in a way that looked like thanks learned late and valuable, and she went. Ethan came home 2 days later with stitches, bruises the color of ugly fruit, and a prescription for slowness. I aired the house, washed sheets till they smelled like sun, and set the kettle to sing. An old woman's army marches on tea. Liam's drawing moved from my coat pocket to the refrigerator door, then to the hallway, where every visitor would have to pass under its little joy. I found a frame for it, a white one that made the yellow paper look like mourning. We practiced the small rituals therapists like to see, calling each other by the names we use when we're tired, sitting on the porch for 10 minutes of real sky, cooking simple food with our hands in the same bowl. The first night, over chicken and rice, Ethan cleared his throat. "Mama, I kept pieces of my life from you," he said. "Not the love, but the trouble. I told myself I was protecting you from worry. I think I was protecting myself from seeing your disappointment." I set my fork down so it wouldn't talk over me. "Disappointment is for broken plates," I said. "You're my son. That's not a plate. That's the table." He laughed once, a thin sound that already knew it would grow stronger. "I'm sorry," he said. "I know," I said. "Thank you." We decided on a family code word, the kind only families can make. We chose something no machine could guess because it was ridiculous and ours. Pancakes in November. If any of us ever called in a panic, we'd say the words in a sentence so ordinary you couldn't script it. How about pancakes in November? Fear has a hard time wearing pajamas. The news found us, as it always does when a story can teach and sell at the same time. A reporter asked for a statement. I gave her one gentle paragraph about listening with wisdom, not just ears. I didn't say the villain's name. Some names don't deserve how the air changes when you speak them. We did one sit-down interview, just one, because other families needed to see us breathing. Ethan explained the technology with the patience of a teacher who refuses to frighten his students into obedience. He held Liam's hand. I held a cup of tea. We looked like every kitchen table in America, and that was the point. "Set a code word," he told the camera. "Ask a question no one else would know. Hang up and call back on a number you trust. Panic is the scammer's favorite tool. Don't let them time your heart." I asked for a final moment. The producer hesitated, then nodded. I looked into the lens the way mothers look out windows waiting for headlights. "A real voice is more than sound," I said. "It remembers your childhood. It mispronounces the same word in the same place. It laughs before the joke is over. If a voice calls you and all you hear is perfection, be suspicious. Love is a little messy. That's how you know it's alive." The cameraman wiped his eye with his sleeve like he was dusting the world. When the red light went off, he said, "I'm calling my mom." "Good," I said. "Tell her to eat something green." A week later, Rivera brought my phone in an envelope. "Time to give you back your ghosts," he said. "Only if you want them." I sat at my kitchen table with the afternoon sun laying warm hands across the wood. I set the phone down. It looked harmless, like a stone with a story inside. "Do you want me to stay?" he asked. "No," I said. "I need to meet this thing alone." He understood and left me with the kind of quiet that doesn't press. I scrolled to the recording. The file name glared. Voicemail, unknown, 1. The little triangle waited like a dare. I pressed play. There it was, the perfect voice that wasn't. My son's vowels, my son's urgency, all draped over a skeleton made of theft. It was almost beautiful if you didn't know what beauty costs. I listened to the words once, then again, not for sense but for seams. The places where breath didn't quite catch, where the waveform forgot the way grief bends a sentence. I thought of the first time Ethan said mama, sticky-cheeked, cracker in hand, victory in his eyes because the mouth had learned a new tool. Machines can be convincing. They cannot be 2 years old with crumbs on their chin. When the message finished, the phone asked if I wanted to keep it. I clicked delete. It didn't mean denial. It meant refusal to let a counterfeit live in our house rent-free. It meant making room for the real thing. I set the phone down and breathed in through my nose, out through my mouth, for counts like the poster had told me in that bright hospital hallway. The air came with a hint of lemon oil and something sweet, vanilla maybe, from a candle the neighbor had left with a casserole the day we came home. American kindness is often buttery. Ethan walked in, Liam just behind him carrying a tower of plastic blocks. The boy dropped them on the rug and looked up. Grandma, watch this. He built and rebuilt his tower till it stood a little crooked and very proud. It's perfect, I said. It's not straight, he said, frowning. Perfect and straight don't always go together, I said. Your tower knows how to be brave. He beamed and set a tiny toy chef on top like a triumphant pilgrim. Pancakes in November, he announced, proud of the phrase that only belonged to us. Ethan and I looked at each other and laughed. Not relief laughs. Real ones. The kind that start in the chest and use the whole face. That evening, we ate dinner on the porch. The sunset gave the sky a peach bruise. A neighbor mowed his lawn in neat stripes. Somewhere down the block, a radio played a song from my youth, the singer's voice worn and warm, imperfect in the ways that make records worth keeping. Amber joined us with a pie she'd bought and promised to learn how to bake. She sat cross-legged on the steps like a girl whose childhood had been busy elsewhere and had finally been invited to come back. We spoke softly about ordinary things, Liam's school project, a pothole the city would never fix, a stray cat that had decided our fence was its kingdom. Extraordinary had worn us out. Regular life is its own medicine. After pie, Liam brought me a blank page and a crayon box. Draw with me, he said. What should we draw? I asked. Us, he said simply. So we did. 2 tall shapes and 1 small one, hand in hand. Under a sun I drew a little crooked on purpose. Above us, I wrote. We're here. He considered the words like a judge, then nodded. That's good, he said. Better than forever. Why's that? I asked. Because forever is a long time, he said. But here is now. I hugged him, grateful to be taught by a child who lived where wisdom is simple. We taped our new drawing beside the old one in the hallway, a gallery of truths. One promised safety with the stubborn hope of a child. The other kept time with the present tense. Both belonged. Later, when dishes were put away and Liam's toothbrush had done its small bright duty, I sat at the kitchen table with a pen and a stack of playing cards. I wrote 10 lines, the kind you stick to a refrigerator, the kind you press into a neighbor's hand, the kind you read to yourself when fear calls at supper. 1. Set a family code word. 2. Call back on a known number. 3. Ask a question only your person would know. 4. Don't wire money to a voice. 5. Trust the stumbles you recognize. 6. Panic is a tool. Don't rent it. 7. Keep 1 photo on your phone that reminds you who you are. 8. Tell the people you love that you love them while it's easy. 9. Save the laughter that sounds like home. 10. When in doubt, choose the human thing. I stuck the first card to my fridge with a magnet shaped like Texas. Big state. Bigger reminders. I poured tea and brought 2 cups to the porch. Ethan took one, held it with both hands, and breathed the steam like prayer. What now? He asked. Now, I said. We make a life from what's true. He nodded, and we listened to the crickets tune the dark. Their chorus wasn't perfect. It was alive. You could tell because not a single note arrived on time, and yet the whole thing held together. I took my phone and opened the audio recorder. I pressed the red button and looked at my son and grandson and the woman who'd chosen courage when fear had other plans for her. I spoke not to a court or a camera, but to anyone who would need these words at 2 in the morning when a storm was rehearsing at the window. This is Margaret, I said, from a little house that learned to listen. If a voice finds you in the dark, don't let fear make you forget what love sounds like. It stumbles. It laughs early. It says mama instead of mom, or dad instead of father. It asks if you want pancakes in November. It remembers you. Machines can echo us. We don't have to echo them back. Choose the human thing. You'll know it when you hear it. I stopped the recording and saved it with a name only we would truly understand. The voice of truth. Ethan squeezed my hand. Home, he said. Home, I answered, and the word fit in my mouth like a hymn I'd known all my life. The moon rose. The wind learned a gentler key. Inside, 2 drawings waited on a hallway wall, keeping watch for the nights when storms would return and the nights when they wouldn't. We turned off the porch light. We didn't need it. We knew our way.